know if we have any new people tonight, but if we do, welcome. My name is Jeff Kamen. This is Books and Bars. And the way it works is ideally you stay muted until you raise your hand and I call on you, and I will lower your hand and ask you to unmute yourself, or I'll unmute you, and then make a question, make a comment, ask a question. Pete is co-hosting tonight, so he'll be helping monitor the chat. And if you're not comfortable or you don't want to bring it up, on the video, feel free to type it into the chat, and we'll try to connect the two at some point. Sometimes there's two different discussions going on, and you guys are all making fun of me in the chat, and I don't know about it unless my co-hosts tell me, so that's fine. But I will keep dropping things in the chat, including how to do Books and Bars, in case you're wondering. There's a little instruction there. I'll tell you a little bit about the author as I'm about to repost here. Tonight's author is Rumaan Alam, and this was a National Book Award nominee. This is his third novel. He is born in 1977. He's an American writer of Bangladeshi origin. He studied at Oberlin College. He's the author of 3 novels, as I said. The other ones are That Kind of Mother and Rich and Pretty. He hosts 2 podcasts for Slate. I haven't listened to him yet, but I've listened to a lot of interviews with him, and I actually am interested in checking out his podcast now. I would love to hear if any of you already listened to his podcast and knew him from that and can speak to that tonight. Feel free to tell us. So he lives with his husband and 2 children in Brooklyn. And like I said, this book was nominated, Leave the World Behind, for the National Book Award. And I thought this was really interesting. And, a lot of times we want to jump to the end right away, but I feel like in all of my pre-discussions of this book, the end is the first thing that has really, really come up with a lot of people. Unfortunately, most people, having questions about it or not liking it as much. And I get that. But he has said that his goal was to write this story so that there was no real explanation, that you couldn't just be like, okay, I figured it out. It's this and this. By throwing in flamingos, by throwing in teeth falling out, by throwing in the noise, he felt there is no way that anyone could find what is the one thing that would have caused all of these things to happen. Unless you maybe say it's some sort of alien invasion or something, that's, we have no idea what that would be like. But I'm interested in then your take on that. Is if while reading this, or by the time you got to the end, did you feel like you needed to fill in some blanks, or if you thought you had something figured out, or it must be X, and that's what's happening here based on this, like, well, the flamingos, that sort of a thing. I think there's a mix of climate change. There's a mix of, is it a nuclear war? Is it, and obviously we have the blackout issue. What is it? Is it an alien attack? Who knows? It's something. Is it something supernatural? It's all over there. It's all over the place. And we don't really get an answer, do we? Now, this book has already been optioned to be a Netflix movie starring Denzel Washington and Julia Roberts, which that's some pretty high caliber Pelican Brief, like return from Pelican Brief kind of action there. That's a reteaming. I'm not exactly sure which parts they're playing. I don't know if Denzel is playing, the older black house owner. It's kind of my guess, but I don't know then if Julia is playing the wife in this, because she's, the wife seems to be a bit younger in this. So I don't know, but kind of an amazing cast. I'm not sure exactly who's writing or directing it, but it was one of those ones that was like, before I think it was even on the bestseller list, it was known that this was bought. This was a big deal. So like I said, I've listened to a lot of interviews with Rumaan, and it in some ways it helped my appreciation of it, because I did have some questions, and I did think, oh boy, people are going to hate this. But maybe you didn't. So tell me, did you love it? Did you hate it? What'd you think? Anyone want to start? Anybody just finish it and want to make a comment or ask a question about it? Kick us off tonight. Feel free to jump in. Love to hear from you. Just raise your hand. I see Kevin's hand is up. Kevin, I'm going to unmute you. Talk to us, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Hi. I'll start us off, I guess. It was kind of a slow intro in this book, like the build up. I'm like, okay, this is this family going on vacation, but it was it almost lost me in that, because the action, nothing, it sort of seemed like nothing was happening through the
Yeah.
course of that. But yeah, I mean, it ended quite interesting. You brought up several things, trying to figure out exactly what happened there. By the end of the story, I was into the characters, and I felt like this was no, it was something to think about. It was not bad, although it did lose me, or at least I would say it wasn't bad. That was my opinion. But I was concerned it was going to lose me at the start. So I guess I don't know exactly if anybody else. I just kind of wanted to get things rolling, but you know,
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kevin. Did you? So I was talking to my wife Rachel about it, and she was surprised to find out that it was written by a man, just because of how much we were in the wife's head, from the start, and how much we were hearing from her. And Rumaan Alam has talked about how people say to him, "Oh, you're so good at writing, female characters," and he has said that he feels that's the bare minimum he should be able to do as a good writer. And if you can't do that, if you can't imagine being the opposite sex, then maybe you shouldn't be a writer. And we've read many men who have not written good female characters, and many women maybe who don't write the male characters as men expect them to be. But I thought that he did a decent job of writing from the wife's perspective. And so I'm interested if anyone else can speak to that also, their thoughts on it. But thank you for kicking it off, Kevin. And your opinion is valid. No, if you say it was good and it was interesting, then it was for you. And hopefully others will agree with you. I agree with you, but it's not about what I think. It's about what Via thinks. Via, talk to us.
Hi, Jeff. Hello, everyone.
I know.
This was an interesting book. I guess that's the main word I would put in there. Interesting. I had kind of mixed feelings about it. I liked a lot of things about it, and I disliked other things about it. But as far as the ending is concerned, I think it is natural as you're reading this book that you want to know, you're going to be curious. What the heck was that noise? What's going on? You're going to want to know that. But at the end, actually, I liked the ending. I didn't feel cheated by it. And when you think about it, if the author had come out and said, geez, this was a nuclear explosion, or this is a terrorist attack, or this is an alien invasion, or this was whatever it might be, if it had gone there, that's like a whole different huge novel right there. I mean,
right.
Then, that would just be too much. So I think really the author's intent, I felt, was to convey how people react when everything that they know is pulled out from under them. Their routine is gone, their benchmarks are gone, they don't know what's going on, and people have different anxiety reactions and how they react to that kind of situation of uncertainty, and how they are with themselves and how they deal with other people. So I felt that was really kind of the overall theme of this novel, and I did like the way the author depicted the different ways people reacted and the different manifestations of their anxiety. One of the things I didn't like, and maybe this is, we could talk about this more later, I don't know if you wanted to get into it, but the technique, I did admire what the author was trying to do, really breaking a lot of conventions with how he wrote the book. Head hopping was like the main thing, which you don't really see in fiction. Normally you stay inside one person's head for a while, whether it's the whole book or a chapter or at least a scene, and then you change scenes and then you get into the next character's head. So I found that a little distracting, but it certainly was very, very interesting. And then you also had sections where the author was jumping in with the omniscient narrator, jumping in after the character says thus and such, and then the author says, and little did this character know that all of this other stuff was going on. And you end up losing the thread of the conversation and who was talking because so much of that happened. But I did find it very interesting, just a little distracting. So I have other things to say, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thanks, Via. Yeah, I think we will come back to a few of the things you brought up. I like your term for it, head hopping. At first, I wasn't sure what you meant, and then I got it. And head hopping. Okay. Um, yeah, I'm wondering if
But I want
people
to point
thought.
out,
Go ahead.
Dr. Todd has his hand up, but I think he might be having trouble with the
Yep,
controls.
and I've made a note of it. I was just typing out that I'm going Susan and then Dr. Todd because I saw Susan's hand and then I was alerted about
Okay.
Dr. Todd's physical hand. So Susan's next and then Dr. Todd. Thanks, Pete. That is a co-host for you. That's really good. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So thank for that. With that segue, we'll come back to head hopping in a bit. Sue, you have your hand up. Talk to us, Sue.
Hello.
Hi.
I was kind of ambivalent on this one. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think he's a good writer. I had no issues with his writing. I got to the end and I just thought it's a big nightmarish dream. And the thing that confused me was if this was an attack that brought down New York City, why did they still have power for such a long period of time? And then the flamingos came in and the teeth falling out. And it just seemed like one of those, I don't know if you guys have them, but I've had them in the past, where you just have such a bizarre dream and all these weird things are strung together. So that was
Yeah.
kind of my takeaway. Um, it was good, but I've read other dystopian novels that I liked a lot better, like Station 11, for example, or other things. So I would definitely read more by this guy, but this was just so.
I hear you, Sue. And I think what's interesting, if I can freely quote from my conversation with my wife again, who gets the pre-Books and Bars version, the teeth falling out is a very common nightmare or a recurring dream for people when you dream about your teeth. It's so much so that there are things written about this, like in your dream encyclopedias, if you've ever dreamt about teeth. And I think he is trying to tap into something there. But I do think he is, and some of the reviews and interviews and stuff that I've read and listened to, I think they're saying if we dwell, or if I, as a reader, dwell too much on the what is it wasn't explained sort of thing, trying to compare it to other post-apocalyptic sort of novels, which dwell in this is how we live after. This is like living in it, like it's just happening, whatever it is, it's just started. And it's like the first day of it, the first and second day of it, and if people have said, and I almost feel like, they're taking us to task on it, but they're saying if you dwell too much on that, maybe, he didn't make his point or we're missing his point. And so then what is he trying to say? Because he doesn't want it to be explained. And he certainly, like he said, he intentionally wrote it with like, if I throw in your teeth fall out and flamingos show up and there's a noise, what is that? You know what I mean? And a couple other things that happen.
It's a dream.
Like, and there's a blackout, right? And it's sort of like there isn't. He didn't want it to be like somebody can go back and go, well, actually, this must be what happened was this asteroid. Yeah, no. He's like, no. You can't explain this. If I did my job right, this can't be explained. And I don't want you to dwell on that. You just are like, it's more about, is it about how, and this I think echoes our last book, Devolution, which is take away your technology, take away your phone is the main thing. You are so lost now as a modern, person in this world. All you have to do is take away someone's phone for most people, and they lose such a high percentage of their abilities. And that is something to be concerned about, I think. And it may be one of the things he's trying to say here is like how useless. And he said in interviews I read that he felt like, he's smart, capable, adult male, but he has never felt like more sort of like a useless, like he provides nothing to the world when he loses Wi-Fi or loses technology, because he's like, if you needed me to write a book review, I could write a book review really well. Like I can write some for you. He goes, but I can't fix a fence, or I can't like hunt and get food for my children or my husband if something happened like this. He's like, you know, and if you take away the things that I use, the technology that I'm good at, my skills don't really translate to to a world in which
Survival.
anything happens. Yeah, any sort of survival skill. And so I actually really liked having these two books back to back, even though in the first, you know, in the last 2 weeks ago book, Devolution, it's very clear what it is, and a couple different things. You know, it's the volcanic eruption, and it's Sasquatch. Which, by the way, there's a Sasquatch documentary on Hulu. I just started it, and it'll make you want to believe. First episode, very good. Highly recommend it. So check out Sasquatch on Hulu, produced by the Duplass brothers. Anyway, yeah. So thank you, Sue. I see now Dr. Todd has been trying to get in here. So Dr. Todd, I know your virtual hand's not up, but can I get you in here now with your physical hand? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Oh, Doctor, you have someone behind you for the first time. You're not alone in the room.
I do.
Okay.
I have.
Does that person know that she's in the book club?
This is my wife.
Okay. Hi, wife.
Yeah, you get to see her in the backdrop. So you can wave to everybody. There she goes. Yeah, see. This was the most horrible book I have ever read.
We did it. We did it.
Yeah.
Wait. Have you read Hotel New Hampshire by John Irving?
I think I have. It's been a long time.
Okay, good.
But...
I want this to be worse than I want for Sue's sake. Sue, who just spoke. Sue and I want you to hate this more than Hotel New Hampshire. Great. We want to have, if Books and Bars can do anything, it's to give you the worst book you ever read also.
Yeah,
but let's make tonight
I
worth
went
your
on
time.
to the book rating thing, the 1 through 5, and I gave it just 1 star simply out of grace and want of giving something.
Okay.
I thought the whole thing was just disjointed, and not disjointed from let me bring you into this and mess with you, sort of like what Devolution did, but rather, well, what if I just do this? So somebody that's trying too hard to do something that accomplishes the exact opposite of what they seek to accomplish. And I felt that the character development was poor and inconsistent with what would be happening for a personality of that sort, even in its most traumatic situation. Many of the interactive scenes, whether it be the sex scenes or the patio with the open robe, the
Yes.
owner, and then the white husband wearing nothing was just so totally unrealistic. It's just I'm not buying it. I'm just not getting it, and I and then wait till chapter 26 before you even hear a noise. So it's like so you got to go 26 chapters in before something actually happens, as if I'm concerned about these malformed characters for 25 previous chapters. And not the case. And then the ending was like, well, what's that all about? It's like, did you not turn it all into the editor, or what happened? Is there a piece at home? Is it did you left something off? I think the saving grace could have been if either one of the couples at the very end all of a sudden woke up from a nightmare dream and they heard the New York traffic in the outside, or something. I think that would have maybe gotten him a 1.5 star. But it was so bad that I had to, once I put it down, had to go to something good. And so you'd all talked about Beartown. And so I went and I read Beartown, and it was like, oh my God, this is like going from want to be 1 star to 10. Just way off, different, and lots of head hopping in that one too. Totally different genre, I get it, but head hopping for sure. But yeah, just very poor, very poor. Just saying.
Well, Todd, thank you for still being here with us. Sorry that you didn't find anything of value in this book. I hope that you do find some value from our discussion tonight, though.
That's going too far, because it did get 1 star. The value of this is we're still in the books I never would have read, and I don't. Even though it's probably the worst thing that I can remember reading, it's not something that I begrudge reading.
Okay.
Because how do you know?
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm glad that you like Frederick Bachman and are liking Beartown. My question in the chat, I haven't, believe it or not, for everything, I watch a lot of stuff. I have not watched Beartown yet on HBO Max, and I'm wondering if anyone has and how it stacks up to the book, because I definitely enjoyed the book, and I'm wondering if anyone who's watched Beartown, you know, what you think of it. I've seen some decent reviews, but I love Bachman. I'm trying to read all of his stuff. Eventually, I'm working around to it. I have the grandmother book. I forget the exact title, but that one's on the shelf to read soon. But I'm glad you're liking Bachman, and stick around if you can, and hopefully you'll get a little more out of the discussion, at least, though, Todd. I see Rebecca's got her hand up for a while. Rebecca, talk to us, please.
Hello.
Hi.
I was not one of those who knew exactly what I wanted from this book. I wasn't sure if I wanted an explanation. I wasn't sure if I wanted more plot. This was a paranoid interior story. It was everybody's perceptions about what was happening, a fair amount of dialogue between them, but mostly it was what was going inside the head. And there was a lot of racial stuff and a lot of exposing of biases and paranoia and obsessions. And so I didn't mind all the idiosyncratic things that came out of it, because I felt like in this case, everybody was thrust into this really weird situation and didn't know what the rules were. I mean, the whole point of who owned the house was, I thought, really an interesting thought, you know, and what you cling to for security in times when, you know, security is not available. I thought the children were interesting characters because they kept doing things that I didn't think that they were going to do. They didn't follow a specific path, you know. In other words, the nobody got hurt really, and I thought there were all these opportunities for people to really get hurt, and that didn't happen. So it was this slow build, as was already talked about, and so it was kind of like, I guess I'm going to say it was like a piece of music. I didn't understand it all, but I was willing to keep listening. Part of that may have been because this was my first audiobook, and so I was not first ever, but in a long time. And so I was enjoying those aspects at the same time. And I did also listen to most of it in one day, so it kind of was, you know, theater for a day. So all in all, I'm going to say I really liked it. The Glass Hotel is something that was similar to me as far as that kind of maintaining a very unusual note or aspect, you know, hushed and not explained fully. And so lots of opportunity for us to fill in the blanks. So I guess I'm going to say I liked it in the end. And I think I'm going to think a lot about it, and I'll be interested in the movie, and that's all.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I think it's one that I've thought about a bunch of times since I finished it, and I finished it a little bit ago. But it's one that I've come back to and wondered about, and I do think it was. And one of the questions I put in the chat, I just felt it was so timely. I mean, he wrote this obviously pre-quarantine, pre-COVID, but reading it for me a couple months ago, you know, before we really had a light at the end of the tunnel. Not that we're out of this thing yet, but like I've at least had one shot. I got a second shot coming next week. But I'll tell you, this to me was one of the most COVID-ish books. Like I talked about wanting to reread Station 11, although it's like that thing, like do you when you're like Nick Hornby writes about this in the first ever Books and Bars book, High Fidelity. When are you miserable because you listen to pop songs, or when you're miserable, do you want to listen to pop songs like, you know, that confirm your misery? You know, like when you're in a bad mood, do you already listen to sad songs, or the other way around? So is this a good COVID read or not? You know, like, is it good to go back and listen or to read stuff like this during that time? I don't know. I think it's kind of fascinating, this and devolution, with this idea of, you know, in some ways we've had to become, you know, not nearly on this level, but there is a certain survivalist aspect to our last year here on Earth that we've had. You know, I remember initially it's like, how do I get my groceries? How do I get, you know what I mean? All these things of like, I just need to protect the people in this house and can't let anyone else in, you know what I mean? And we have to, you know, sanitize everything, and, you know, we're wearing a mask. And I mean, there's just a lot of things in this book that I was like, oh my gosh, like reading this during this time really hit me. And so I have gone back and thought about this a bit. I'll watch it, and I will read more by this author. I think why, and I want to throw this out there to anyone who really didn't like it, and I understand, that's fine. But why do you think this was a finalist for the National Book Award and got such great reviews and is such a top seller? What do critics and other readers see in this? And maybe you're one of those. Tell us something that's positive that you found in it, or why you think other people like it. But Maura's had her hand up for a while, so I'd love to call on her. Maura, may I unmute you and lower your hand? Talk to us.
Yes, I initially did not like, I gave it like 3 out of 5, but the more I thought about it, the more it really stuck with me. And I think partly it was my mindset. So I read it like on a plane ride back home after like kind of a devastating event, like a pivotal event in my life happened. And I didn't know what to expect. It was like, okay, this came in on the library. I'll read this. Like, and I was kind of in shock with what was going on at the moment. And like this book for me, like, looking back on it, it is like such a mindful book. It's like there's this devastating, like kind of life-changing moment, like that moment in time where you can say like my life has changed, and all of the kind of like boring nuances of what life was like before seem to have so much more meaning. Which I think was that first part of the book where it was just kind of a drag, and they're talking about the weird smells in the car, and it's those kind of things that like, well, I will never have that again. And those are things that I was taking for granted before. And I really appreciate that the book did put in those like kind of minute details that just, that like that's the part of life that we're experiencing. And it's not so much that event, but it's like what you bring with you as you are moving through this. Like, what do you remember as your last day before the noise happened, or the last conversation with your kid before his teeth fell out? Like, and that I thought was, I didn't really pick up on it as I was reading it, but after the fact, I think that was the beautiful piece of the book to me. It's like, it didn't matter what happened. It was about the impacts that it had on our lives, and what it kind of, how we reconciled with merging those our two narratives together.
I like that a lot more. And I like this idea of, I mean, we see in the book the example of, you know, the husband leaves and he runs into the woman who speaks Spanish, doesn't speak any English, and he leaves her. And then he sits with, and he doesn't know what to do. And it's this incredible shame that he feels, that he then admits, you know, like at the end, that he did that. But this is like, what would you do? It doesn't matter what this life-changing situation is, but we're in one now. What would you be like? What would you do? How would you react to your neighbor, your friend, your, these people that come asking for help? And then there's this whole other element to it. He definitely plays this situation of, it's a bit of a racial thing, right? Because it's like, oh, this unknown, Black couple shows up at night on your doorstep. Do you believe them or not? Like, and then why wouldn't you necessarily believe, them at first because of who you are and who they are and that sort of thing. And I think it's interesting what he plays on. And I think he's talking about, it's not what is the life-changing event, but it's like, you've had one. What if these are your last couple days on Earth? How would you spend them? Here's who you're with. How do you react to a stranger in this situation? How do you react to your most loved ones? And what if you don't have another day? But you don't necessarily know that until, it's too late. So
Yeah.
Great points. Thank you. Courtney's had her hand up for a while. Courtney, I'm unmuting you. Talk to us.
Hey, so let's see. I feel like my kind of takeaway, or one thing that I was kind of grappling with, was like, if like my expectations for this book were just so high. Like before we started reading it, I saw Roxane Gay gave it 5 stars on Goodreads and was like, "Whoa, it's just going to blow your mind. It's thrilling." And, the racial dynamics are so, intense, which, just a quick paraphrase, like that's not actually what she said. But so I feel like I had this, like, I usually like really enjoy her ratings or kind of track with her. And then I feel like like to call it a thriller, it was so low key. Or I feel like there was like, first when the couples were introduced to each other, there was like a couple of like, oh, like, why am I feeling uncomfortable? But then just by the next page it moved on. Or even the like, are they who they say they are? By the next page it's like, well, actually, yeah, there is, this big, like, any kind of like buildup was just resolved, so quickly. And I agree. I appreciate what was being said in the chat about, the prose being so beautiful. I so agree with that. I think the writing was like very high quality. But what was also something that I was kind of grappling with was, for a book with a good amount of mystery, or, what's going on here, it was pretty short. It was pretty brief. But then he would spend like 2 pages being like, we're at the grocery store, and then he spent 2 pages listing every single item that she bought at the grocery store, and written in a very like nice way as far as like listing grocery items goes. But just the like amount of real estate that took up in a very quick book, I was like, all right, well, what are we doing here? Who didn't edit this out?
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up, and I just posted a little bit about that in the chat. Here's my thought on that, but I'm interested in yours. I feel like what he set up early, and then it's brought back a couple times, is that money is tight for this family, and that these are extravagances. But this is a vacation. We're going to splurge a little bit, but it's like we have to keep it tight. And so there was a few references to, we're not doing as well. Like we're barely, able to live where we live, and this is kind of a stretch. And then the fact that the owner of the house, is doing much better, but it's the they don't believe that who it is at first, and they're dealing with that. And it's like, then it's almost it's like, it's taken away some of his the husband's power, because of how he's just not doing as well, and they don't have as much money, and
it
was
lost
kind of
very easily.
And I also feel that it was it's also telling us where we are, what kind of place this is. You can picture that store from that list of what she bought. Then kind of what Airbnb, kind of where the area this is. You can. It was kind of interesting of for what percentage of the book is that grocery list. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Anyone feel free to raise your hand or chime in different than mine. But I see Evelyn's got her hand up about this, so I'm going to jump to Evelyn, and then we'll come back to the other hands, because Evelyn, talk to us about this one. You with us? Or you don't want to talk?
Yeah, Jeff, absolutely agree with you. Like, oh, I'm here.
Yeah. Hey, you still here?
Do you
Hello?
hear me? Hi.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear
I
me?
got you.
Can you hear me?
you. I see the
Okay,
TC.
okay, good.
I see the TC. Gotcha.
Oh God, I'm so embarrassed at this point. They've been doing so poorly.
Hey, the Brewers just swept the Padres. So how about that?
Oh, okay. I did not know that. That is,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, that's good to know. So anyway, yeah, no, Jeff, I absolutely agree with you. I also like was kind of wondering, where's this book going, right? Like, I'm sorry, I came in about 25 minutes late, so I don't know what you guys said, but like, where is it going? Because I came with this completely blind, and I'm like, okay, they're this family on vacation. It was just started off so slow, and as like Courtney pointed out, like, you know, there were 2 pages of like what they bought, and all of that, but it all came back around because yes, to me it was, there was the race difference, but really a lot of it was a class difference more than race, I thought, or like a, you know, like a financial elevation, socioeconomic. And yeah, it just like the thing that I highlighted in the book, which I thought was interesting. It says Clay had tenure and Amanda had the title of director, but they did not have level floor and central air conditioning.
Yeah.
You know, like that was like just this like that's just the fact that this house was like sound in every way possible, and they came back again and again about it, really stuck with me. And there was so much mention of like how prepared this couple was, the Washingtons, like everything, they were ready for everything, and it kept on like the Amanda and Clay kept on seeing that as a result of their wealth, which I thought was interesting. Like he looked in the glove box of George's car, and he's like, oh, like everything that you would ever want in a glove box was like perfectly there, even like that first aid kit. And he said like, oh, of course they have it like that, because like that's what wealth gives you. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like I also could put these things in the glove box of my car, and so I'm wondering what people think about that. But they seems to equate like a sort of preparedness and a readiness for everything with the wealth of this couple. What the other thing that I thought was interesting was to compare like the readiness of this couple for everything with last time's book, and how these people were also very wealthy and privileged, and they just thought that they could just get anything at a moment's notice and like not ready for anything. So that was I thought that was an interesting take on like, especially the books, like what exactly are like the benefits of wealth, and maybe in a way intellect. I don't know if it was but I don't think Amanda and Clay are both like, you know, they're smart people. I guess Clay is a professor and Amanda's like, you know, she's an educated woman. So I don't know.
All right. Well,
that.
I want to throw this out to the group. What if we as Books and Bars decide, because of how we did this, that the reason there was the noise and the flamingos and the teeth falling out is because Mount Rainier went volcanic, and there was a Sasquatch tribe that attacked the US, and that this book is happening at the same time, and that might as well be that. Let's say it was Sasquatch.
Yeah.
But
That would have made it a better novel.
Thank you. Can you give it 1.5 stars and say, if you read this as a sequel to Devolution, then or as, you know, this is happening at the same time as Devolution. That's good stuff. Thanks, Evelyn. And if you had your hand up about something else, did you want to say something else? I made you talk about the current topic while I have you.
Yeah, just really quick. I also thought that the relationship, the developing relationship between the two couples, the two families, was extremely believable. You know, when you put somebody in like that kind of a pressure, unknown situation, you know, I think that those bonds happen very quickly. It seemed interesting to me that the last thing to go almost was their admission to each other of those bonds. Like that seemed to be the hardest for them to like admit out loud, that this is where they were and they were sort of stuck together. Like that last conversation that we were able to witness between Amanda and Ruth, you know, that was a breakthrough, right? Where they like, you know, finally came to like they were both moms, they both had feeling like, and were able to like fully express what they felt to each other. And it seemed like Clay and George were definitely heading in that direction with like admitting that they were stuck in this together, and that's where they were gonna what to do going forward. Unless somebody else has read something out, like feels like this went a different direction.
And if you have, please raise your hand and join in, or put it in the chat. So thank you, Evelyn. I want to throw this out there to Pete and to Dr. Todd and others. When I went down to reactions, at least on my screen and my Zoom, under reactions, I can actually raise my hand as the host, which I don't think I've ever been able to do before. So I don't know. My hand is up right now. If someone wants to call on me, I'll wait because it wasn't up before. But I see it in mine, but I'm not listed in the part. Oh, no, my hand's up in there too. So I don't know. If you're having a hard time raising your hand, if you see the reactions button at the bottom, click on that and then look. And there should be a section for raising your hand. Pete, I'd be especially interested for you as the co-host if you have that or not, because why would the host have it? The co-host must have it now. So
I cannot raise my hand. But they it's a platform. They change features all the time. I do this for a living too.
I have discovered that if you own a version of Zoom, which I do for my work stuff, it'll sometimes sign you in that way, so you become this arbitrary co-host or co-person thing, and your hand gesture is raising the hand is taken away.
Okay, well, maybe that's what's happened to you. Sorry about that, Todd, but at least you didn't have to wait too long. It keeps working, and we'll get the message if you raise your hand again. But Kara's had her hand up for a while. Oh, Pete?
Forever.
Yeah, were you?
Yeah, Kara's had her hand up forever.
Kara's had her hand up forever, and then so has your wife. And then William Francis Sullivan. Oh my gosh, these people have been waiting, Pete. And all you're doing is jawing on about Sasquatch. Kara, talk to us.
Well, just to keep it going with Sasquatch, I never wear this shirt during work days, but this is my Sax Squatch t-shirt.
I like it.
The greatest,
awesome.
great artist from North Carolina.
I like it.
Yeah, I think I must be a contrarian because I actually didn't mind this book.
Cool.
I thought like it wasn't for me. I don't love post-apocalyptic stories in general, but I thought his writing was just really excellent, and he made me sort of care about people that ordinarily would be pretty unlikable to me. I thought this was an interesting contrast. The White family to me was very similar to a lot of the families we saw in Devolution. And obviously the Washingtons were wealthier, but I do think that you can maybe ascribe a lot of their being better prepared for things to race. I think Black people that grew up during Jim Crow, even if they're wealthy, probably think about things more than wealthy white people do. So I don't know. I liked the interactions they had with each other. I didn't always find them realistic, but what it kept reminding me of was plays like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And so I actually think this would work really well as a stage production. And I think the movie with the actors would be really well too. Cause I I can't imagine a lot of people like talking to each other the way that these characters talk to each other, but like they would have monologues and like they'd say weird things, and sometimes a character would not be paying attention to the conversation and just like repeating themselves a bunch of times. Like it felt very theatrical to me. And so I kind of was like imagining it like that. And I think, I don't know, I think it's like a vehicle for like a really good performance for some actors. So I thought that was an interesting element. I liked that they didn't explain anything, and I liked that it was confusing and no one knew what was going on. I think if they had tried to explain it, I would have disliked it. I think that would have ruined the book for me. Because like we're in the characters' heads for so much of the book and they don't know what's going on. Like they don't have access to anything. So even though we got the omniscient narrator at times, I liked that the narrator also didn't really seem to know what was going on. He knew as much as the characters knew. What I dislike about most post-apocalyptic stories, and what I disliked about devolution, was I just feel like the characters, the way that they act so selfishly to me is not realistic. And obviously COVID, we have seen a lot of like very selfish behavior with like, you know, anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers. If you remember early on when everyone was like hoarding toilet paper and stuff like that, like, yes, we've seen like bad behavior. I do think like a long pandemic that goes on like over a year is like a different thing to react to than like massive blackouts and weird situations. And I just think realistically, when there is like a really intense disaster that brings up people's emotions, people do come together. I think like history has shown that, like, yes, there are some bad people, but overall it's good people. Like just this past week, I think we've seen that. Like I've been in Brooklyn Center like multiple times, and like people really come together when terrible things happen. And I think like there were a few situations in this book where he would sometimes go off to talk about other people. And so like in New York, there was this restaurant that was like on the street, like just giving out food. Like that's like what I would expect to see. And I work in like the service industry, like providing social service industry. And like we've had like 5,000 to 6,000 books donated to us this year for people. And like the free food market where I work has gotten like tons of support, like lots of money and lots of donations. Like, so even though people are behaving selfishly during the pandemic, like there's so much support, like people want to help. And so I just get tired of reading books where it's like, man, everything's terrible and look at how selfish humans are and how they react. I think that is just unrealistic. So to me, these books don't like teach me anything about like, you know, what the COVID-19 pandemic would be like. I just don't. I personally just find that the most unrealistic part of them.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you you like the prose and that you did find some things to like about it. I am wondering if you mentioned books donating, and that just sent off a ding in my head. Do you need more books to be donated somewhere? And do you want to share? I mean, because I always have books that I'm putting in little free libraries and giving to my mom. So if you have a place that needs books, let us know. We might have some books to give.
I was going to say there's always books. I work at an organization called Neighborhood House. And so we give out lots of books to youth and like young children. And then I work with adults. And so we give out books to adults as well. And we're going to be organizing like a big, like kind of free book fair this summer. Okay. So if there are books and anyone wants to donate, we probably could take them. But like I said, we've had so much generosity. And we get books donated every year, but I think we've gotten more books donated in 2020 than we've like ever seen. So.
Well, that's great. That's great. So you don't need the 20th copy of Dan Brown's Angels and Demons.
Yeah, that's probably not one of the ones that people would like really be trying to get, but.
Okay, cool. You know, we've tried to do some book swap stuff before, but yeah, there's, I mean, I live in South Minneapolis in Kingfield, and there are, there's a plethora of little free libraries, which is great. And I walk past free books and put free books out all the time. So it's beautiful. But if anyone needs any or wants any, you know, let me know. Okay, Carolyn's had her hand up for a while. Carolyn O'Grady, how are you feeling? You had your second shot.
Oh, yes. Hi. Yeah, I got my second shot yesterday. And so I'm a little punkish, as they say. So if my thoughts are disjointed, just, you know, bear with me. No, I really was looking forward to this discussion because I hated the book. I just hated it, right? And you know, I on Goodreads I gave it 1 star out of 5, and but then I had so much fun making fun of it with Pete that I had to give it another star, right? So it was, yeah, it was anyway. But the things I didn't like about the book was the head hopping. That was the one, you know, I just was so distracted by every paragraph they're going into somebody else's head, and I'm like, well, who am I focusing on, right? The thing that really struck me is like, I want to know if this was a story that said, somebody said, you got to make this into a novel. And so he just stretched it out. He didn't like make this one element in the story. He just made a grocery list and a weird sex scene and flamingos and the shed, and, you know, so, but I'm grateful for other perspectives because it does help me understand why it might be a finalist instead of like I have no idea why, right? So those are some of my takeaways.
So, okay, so you were the head hopping bothered you, which you guys know there's a famous person, Hedda Hopper. Hedda Hopper wrote about celebrities and stuff. She was back in like the muckraking, William Randolph Hearst days, like Citizen Kane, that sort of stuff. Anyway, Hedda Hopper, you keep saying, I keep hearing head hopping, and I can't not think of the journalist Hedda Hopper. But did you feel that were there certain characters that you felt you wanted to be in their head, or that, you know, were better written, or that you relate to, and then you didn't want to go to the other one? Or was it just moving around too much, like too many of them, you didn't feel like you got any good sense of any of them?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. I think I would have preferred 1 or 2, or maybe 1 a chapter. But I think the little girl would have been a pretty great narrator for the book. I mean, the white couple is just kind of weird and selfish, and I don't know, I just couldn't get into it. And I do have to shout out to Dr. Todd. I actually just finished Beartown yesterday, so it's just like, yes, it's a much better book, you know. But
Bachman's great. Bachman's great, and of course, if you haven't read A Man Called Uwe, I mean, that was his breakthrough, and we did that one here too. But yeah, and there's a sequel, of course, to Beartown, and I still haven't heard from anyone. Maybe in the chat it's there. Maybe Pete can let us know. But if anyone's seen the show, it's on my I'll probably watch it list. But sometimes when you've read the book and you know the whole story, like I'm not as excited of watching the movie or the show, because when you know what's going to happen. Other times it's like, oh, I can't wait to see how they adapt that. Like, you know, what are they going to do with that? But for whatever reason, I haven't checked out Beartown yet. But we do love the book, and I'm not even a hockey guy, but I live in the state of hockey, so you know. I used to have hockey hair. What can I say? William, talk to us. Yeah, unmute you.
I guess you can add me to this list of people that recently finished Beartown. I finished that like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Where were you guys a couple years ago at the Amsterdam when we met and talked about it? You should have been there.
I definitely almost would rather talk about that book. I don't know. I do join the list of people that really didn't like this book, which is weird because, you know, I come from a theater background and I love talky kind of plays, and like I love Tennessee Williams, these big massive dramas that all just take place in a room, and like the psychology. And I just agree with some of the comments of like there didn't seem to be like a lot of conflict or like stakes, even with a book about the world ending. Like I didn't really buy the, you know, social breakdown of the characters, or, you know, the level of freak out there was to just like not having a phone. Like it felt like a very mundane apocalypse, and I wasn't necessarily like super interested. I was interested in the internal like character study of like watching what happens instead of focusing on that instead of like what's happening outside. I guess I just didn't find the characters particularly interesting, or like their level of struggle with the apocalypse a particular compelling, case. And I definitely, there was some talk of like it being the prose is very beautiful, but I also think it's very, very like pretentious in a way. And it's like it's written like a book that ends up on the national finalists, and like, a person who has a really fancy MFA from one of the fancy MFA programs, and writes books for other people of that background who all really love them. So I don't know, it just really didn't speak to me personally.
Well, thanks, William. And I like what you're saying about the theater that you like. Because as I mentioned in the chat, and I agree with Kara, I could see this being a really interesting, well done play. You could totally do it with like, I'm already like imagining like the sound design. You just have like a noise, and there's something out the window, and it would be really just get like the 4 best actors you could, and then the kids can be a so-so or whatever. But yeah, it would probably be a pretty cool play. I'm sorry that you didn't find too much else there for you, but yeah, what do you like about Beartown? Feel free, now you got the chance. Mike's still on you. You want to talk about it?
Oh, sure. I'm not a sports fan, and I'm not a hockey fan. And I loved how much it really sold me on the culture and the energy. I come from a small football town, so I totally get the layout of that town to a T. And like, I almost got like roped into the love of the sport and the culture around it. And then it's like, it revealed like what the book is actually about, and like my heart broke in like real time. It was like, oh no, this is one of those stories. And just watching the fallout, and just watching everyone kind of line up along sides you kind of expect and have seen so many times before. It was just like a heartbreak for the last 200 pages. It was just so hard to watch everything play out, but so beautifully done.
William, are you from Green Bay by any chance?
No, but I'm from Wanakee, Wisconsin, which is
Okay.
They go to the
Well, there you
state
go.
like all the time.
Excellent. Yeah, no spoilers then for anyone that, but yeah, read Beartown, and then we'll do more Bachman. Maybe we'll do the 3rd book in that series or something at some point, and come back around. I'm interested also if anyone's read the 2nd book in the Beartown series, and how they feel about that compared to the first one, and all that. Feel free to chime in. But Rebecca's had her hand up, so Rebecca, I'm coming back to you.
Someone said earlier, I think I was actually you, Jeff, about the omniscient narrator, and I'm not sure, someone else, about we only knew what the characters knew, but of course the omniscient narrator knew stuff. That was actually my one main complaint with the book, because the omniscient narrator would drop those hints about what was the cause? Was it the planes going over, or the whatever? And it was done in such a way, I think, that kind of showed disinterest, or even contempt for the characters, as if they didn't deserve to know actually what was going on. And so in those cases, when it was obvious, they dropped enough hints, and they weren't going to follow up, they were, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, I realized that I almost felt like they were contemptuous of the reader being able to understand. And so I think his determination to keep it vague and not explicit about what's going on, in a way worked against the urgency, I guess, of the book. It felt like this was something that was being discussed way after the event had taken place. And yes, it's in the now for the characters, but for the omniscient narrator, it's something that had happened a while ago, and they're examining, the situation, almost clinical, like a doctor examining, or almost like what aliens would do if they were. So that's my vote. I vote that it was aliens, and that they were had some way of knowing what happened in that particular house with that particular group of people, and were almost amused or clinically interested in their reactions. So I appreciate all your comments, everyone. You're really helping me think through some of my reactions to it.
So by that token, what do you have an idea then? Who is that narrator in this situation then?
Well, if it
Like-
is, if it is aliens, you know, some entity that has knowledge and power that is greater than, you know, because they seem to persist beyond the end of the world, even if it's a god figure or you know, whatever. They don't seem to be all that sad about the results. And even for the animals, that's where I got a real sense of panic thinking about the deer, or thinking about the flamingos, or thinking about the birds, and how we were fucking things up, so badly for them. And that's where I got the sense of urgency, but then it would disappear. And so I don't know. I'm not sure who the narrator is.
All right. Evelyn's got her hand up. Evelyn, talk to us.
Yeah, Rebecca, I really liked what you said. I like when you say like you got the sense that it was somebody who knew what was happening, you know, from maybe a bit further into the future, and was like sort of looking back on this group of people. Person the narrator had the most sympathy for was like on whose team the narrator was on, was definitely Rose. I mean, in the end, like, no, I seriously, like, she says, the narrator says she left the suite because she didn't want, no one took her seriously because she was a kid, but Rose was not an idiot. That noise last night was the answer her parents had been pretending not to wait for. But Rose had read books, Rose had seen movies, Rose knew how the story would end, and Rose knew they shouldn't panic but prepare. And, you know, like, whoever the narrator is, you know, really seems to be praising Rose, and eventually points out that Rose survives all of this, right? I hope everyone noticed that. And I can't remember what exactly they said, but like Rose ends up surviving, one of the few people to like make it through all of this. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, the narrator likes Rose, and everyone else is just sort of in denial, perhaps. And
But I got a question for you, Evelyn, because I might have missed something, because I thought the line was that when they talked about the deer turning white, that Rose and her family will never see that, and it happens in a year, implying that
yes,
they all die.
It does. Okay, let me find that for you, Pete. I will find it.
Oh, thanks. But yes, if Rose makes it, that would be cool, because
Pete, while you're here, as the co-host, what's going on in the chat?
Oh, there's a lot, but you keep covering it, because like there's a lot of stuff about head hopping at first. Kara, good reading Devolution right before reading this one. Seemed like a good matchup for End of the World. I like the Fleischman is in trouble, is kind of a prepper, a primer, whatever, for the wealth that we've run into in this book. And the wealth and race stuff, do they do a good job or not? It's kind of, I have my own opinions. I'll get to those at some point, but and then Kara answered some questions about Neighborhood House for those of us that want to contribute to that. And then shout out to Todd there, because that was my opening line. If I wasn't co-hosting this, is it's no longer about the chain, it's about the noise, because they wrote so much about the noise, and then in the end, who really cares? Now it's good writing in that you get scared, like, all right, I'm scared now, so what? And the same with the flamingos on the prep before the flamingos showed up. I was all scared, and then like, well, it's flamingos. That's kind of fun, isn't it? Shouldn't you be happy you got flamingos now? But and then I'll point out two things that some things we haven't talked about. Amanda perving on the bag boy. I mean, it's a child. Come on, Amanda. And then Danny, the dickwad, like we're GH was building Danny up, and he's just a shitty guy. And then I was happy that his wife was literally named Karen, and her teeth were about to fall out. So what do you, follow up on that, Jeff?
I'll follow up on that. I just so I'm trying to I don't know, find something that we haven't found yet, and I'm literally Googling what is the meaning of leave the world behind, or what is the point of it. And the fifth thing that comes up: how do I quit a book club? Which is really funny to me.
No way.
So does that mean there are a lot of people that were like discussing this book, and then they're like, and then my second question is, how do I quit a book club? So I want to click on that and let any of you know, just if you want to know how to quit, I can help you. But the meaning of this book and what it's trying to say. Well, I posted something from the LA Times book review and from the New Yorker book review, and I like what both of those things have to say. I don't know if we're getting to what the meaning of it is, but of course, one of the things I always ask, but I want to hear from you guys, you know, what did you take away from this, and what do you think the author's trying to say? So if you have something, if you've sat with this for a while, you know, what is he trying to say? What's your takeaway? We got Maura, who's had her hand up though, so she doesn't have to answer that. She could say whatever she wants to say for now. Maura, talk to us.
Yeah, hot take with the narrator. I think and I don't even know if the narrator is accurate, but if it's Rose like writing a story to explain what's going on. As a former bookish child and now bookish adult, that's what I would have done. I would have written a narrator that was like, Mara is the smartest of everybody and is going to get all these supplies. And like, I know all these little things. So whether Rose survives or not, I think like it was like a voice of her like outside of it, like processing what was going on. And I think that's why the noise was like such a thing, because that's when like her big brother, her strong big brother, all of a sudden was like turned into a baby with no teeth anymore. And so that was like kind of a reckoning with her worldview.
That's pretty cool. I like that. I like that idea, and I like how you said, yeah, with the losing of the teeth, it reverts someone back to being a baby. That's really cool. Evelyn's got her hand up. Talk to us, Evelyn.
Hold on, real quick. The reason why teeth. Sorry, hold on real sec. I'm sorry, Evelyn. The reason why we dream about our teeth falling out is because they have.
Okay, you're right. They have.
Interesting.
Unless you're a really young person at Books and Bars and that hasn't happened to you yet. What are you doing reading this book? Aren't there other books that were assigned to you? But thanks for being here. I'd like to hear from you. If you still have your baby teeth, raise your hand. Speaking of someone without any baby teeth.
Evelyn.
Evelyn, talk to us about your baby teeth.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it matters, but Rose doesn't actually know that her brother's teeth have fallen out because she hasn't seen it yet. I'm sure she finds out eventually.
But if she is,
yeah, I just wanted
years later, the idea is she would know at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, there's Pete, it's open to interpretation. The way it's phrased, so maybe some other people know better than I, but like the part where I thought that maybe it said that Rose would survive is it says Rose was a survivor and would survive. She knew by some instinct, maybe just the human connection, that she was in the minority. So there, it did say that there, and then I did find the quote about the deer. And then it says, the next generation of these deer would be born white, as the unicorn in those Flemish tapestries that Rose and her family would never see. So that's also open for interpretation. Like maybe the Flemish tapestries got burned down in a nuclear bomb. I don't know. So I don't know.
Oh, thanks, Evelyn. No, I like it. Rose is one of the characters I liked in the book. So if like is a strong word in these characters, but yeah, she's a neat girl, and I'd like to hear her sequel.
I also love the argument that reading is what's going to make you survive. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, cool.
I see Todd's got his hand up. Todd, talk to us.
Yes, back to the whole racial tension. I will give it, and by the way, my thoughts have been with you all this week in living through a city of potential unrest. So thoughts and prayers have been with you. But the closest I thought it became interesting to the racial tension was actually between George Washington and Danny, where he perceived Danny as something different than he was. And it reminded me almost of reading Uncle Tom's Cabin when Tom first gets paid or gets money back from the master and realizes that he has worth. And here was almost the convergence of that, of George realizing his only worth was the money he was able to give to Danny, that there was nothing else there. He graciously handled it, I thought, but I thought that was just a moment, like maybe a page of interestingness of the thing.
Thanks, Todd. I want to go back to so with what we just heard though before that I unfortunately I see someone wants to be Team Rose for narrator, but I don't think she can be with the fact that the narrator is saying that Rose will never see this. So that eliminates. This is like a mystery where we're eliminating them one by one. We're back to it being Sasquatch so far is the current narrator, or it's somebody from Beartown. We haven't decided yet. If you have other ideas who it could be, right now it's Sasquatch or an alien or someone from Beartown. And if you haven't read the sequel to Beartown, you know that there are aliens in that also. Oh,
at the beginning of the chat, I posted a file that you can see about Sasquatch Lives Matter or something. That's
okay. It doesn't relate to the documentary.
Not at all. It's
okay.
just funny.
All right. Well, Via's got her hand up. Via, talk to us.
Yeah, just want to respond to what Todd just said. I like that scene between George Washington and Danny. I didn't take it so much as a racial tension scene because it kind of reflected on, in my life, back to something that happened in 9/11, and also something that Jeff, that you said a little bit earlier tonight about how in an emergency situation, people pull in and become protective of who's closest to them. So the relationship that I saw between, by the way, George Washington was kind of my favorite character. I liked Rose too, but I didn't like most of the characters in this book. But I guess the reason I liked him was he was the most rational of the bunch, self-made man, and he was more together. But he showed a little bit of his vulnerability in that scene with Danny because, you know, he just had to go and see this guy who his relationship with him was as employing him as a contractor. So they probably had several interactions in a very superficial, pleasant situation. And George Washington had a certain feeling about the guy as being very friendly. And maybe they were even, he was even maybe under the illusion, maybe they were a little closer than he thought they were. But when push comes to shove and we're in an emergency with a lot of uncertainties, Danny pulls back into, hey, you know, I don't care what you guys are up to, but I'm protecting my family. And that something similar to that happened to me during 9/11. I don't need to go into the whole story, but it's just a part of, you know, one reaction to this kind of situation where, yeah, you know, as Kara said, some people get very, are very helpful and reach out to other people, but other people pull in and want to protect their family. So that's what I took out of that scene. And I thought it was very realistic.
Thanks, Bia. Some great points there. I thought I saw another hand, but I see it now. Kara's hand is up. Kara, talk to us.
I just want to know, like, why do we think that most post-apocalyptic stories are about people closing in and being selfish? Can anyone think of examples where it is about, you know, community coming together and like kind of showing the resilience people have rather than like all of the most negative aspects? I think I can think of like maybe Parable of a Sower that has like a combination of both of those, but I feel like a lot of the books that I've read, I haven't liked because they're pretty depressing about, you know, how humanity would react.
I think what we see in a lot of these stories is initially the characters do that and it becomes this survival of the fittest. But what they end up trying to seek is a return to community. And you see in stories, even like The Walking Dead, which started as a comic book, this idea of you find your people and you kind of recreate like a city or a town or a little village to yourself that then you do come back together. And in Station 11, we see that too, where you're out on your own for a while and, you know, maybe some of your friends and family have been killed. And then this character kind of has to find their way and maybe, you know, hurt other people to protect themselves, but they are moving towards a place of coming back to community and togetherness and love and stuff like that. I can think of that in a few of the stories. It seems like that's the arc. There is initially that every man for himself, but it all comes back to really be happy and to survive. You can't be an island. You do have to work together with other people and share and be a community and all those things. That's
Are there any books where the people realize that earlier on and face a different sort of conflict though?
From the start, there probably are. Anyone else have ideas? Maura's got her hand up. Maura, do you know one?
I do not know one.
Okay.
But my idea with that is the majority of the people that have been published and get publicity are white people. And white culture is very individualistic and does have that, I think, it inherent in American culture too, of this competitiveness of if I share this resource with you, I won't have this resource. And so I think a lot of times we get that narrative because that's the dominant culture when there's other cultures that are more community focused and less individualistic. And one thing I do like about sci-fi and like is that it often like kind of, it sometimes does it in very in very racist terms of like going back to like old ways, but is that there usually is this realization of like, oh, we need other people to survive. But I think it's a white supremacy thing. So
Okay, fair enough. I see in the chat, Rachel Geiser and I both brought up The Passage as something. If you remember that one we read a while back, that was where there's vampires that are basically living off of humans, and so it's human versus vampire. I think fairly early on, it becomes, you know, it's all of the humans versus all of the vampires, and there's initially a lot more humans, but and then the vampires run into a situation where they're depleting their own food source. They have to deal with that. So Rebecca's got her hand up. Rebecca, talk to us.
The book that came to my mind, and it kind of imprinted me for all post-apocalyptic books, or actually this is more apocalyptic because it's actually having happenings during this time, was On the Beach by Neville Shute. And the reason why that came to mind is the very most important thing for those survivors after the initial thing was to find other survivors and to find that community. So I don't know whether that means that's a good part of us, but I think there's an instinct built into us that for our survival, we need other people. And if we cannot conquer our individual issues, we have no chance of survival. So that was my takeaway from that book from way, way, way back when. And I've kind of developed a taste for apocalyptic books, post-apocalyptic. The other one that really influenced me was The Stand, because it was that classic good versus evil. So there were people who were motivated right away to do the right things. And then there were also people who were seduced into being bad. And in the way Stephen King writes it, it's most things fleshy and earthly are bad, or at least take you into evil. So that doesn't really apply here. But those are my thoughts on post-apocalyptic books. And I don't know. I think authors can betray their basic assumptions about humans when they write them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure in this, even in what we just experienced, we saw, we talked about it. We saw the different reactions to it. I mean, you probably know people that hoarded toilet paper. I have some for sale if anyone wants any. I have tons of TP. I'm just kidding. I don't.
Yeah,
I wasn't one of them. But we know people that did that, and we also know people that right away pitched in and how can I help, and help other people. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, to Kara's point too, is like that's where like I think this was, and Carolyn and I talked about this a bunch, is that like after the pandemic, what our experience was is a lot more about community. And immediately our whole neighborhood connected because we were already kind of tight with each other to begin with. But we all put out a list of like, all right, we got a lot of toilet paper. Tell us anyone who needs any. We'll share what we got, and just made sure. And one of the neighbors had COVID very early, and we worked on a deliver food and meals to them. And there's still, it's really, there's a whole lot of more stories of community than there are like that's covered in this kind of stuff. And then I've read a lot of post-apocalyptic literature, and I threw out Earth Abides in there, where it's really kind of a sweet story of the world ends, but people come together and put it back together with community. And I think it's little things characters do in the beginning that have a big positive impact at the end. And that book was written in the 50s, and there's then they call the Spartans, but so much of the post-apocalyptic literature, with the exceptions of everything everyone's talking about here, like The Stand and stuff, there's often racist tropes that come up all the time in that genre, which I always caution people to get a review before you read one of those things. And back to this particular book, that I like how there's good writing, and that she didn't, he got people scared of stupid things, but then he, much like Stephen King can get you terrified of the family dog, I don't think this book landed on a thesis. I hope Denzel and Julia, I have great respect for those two, so I think they'll land the plane with a screenplay. But I just think this could have been a lot better.
Fair enough. Does anyone else have any thoughts going back to maybe what the message was, or what the author was trying to say with it, or even just what your takeaway was, whether the author intended it or not? What are you taking away from this? What's your anyone? Anyone that hasn't had a chance tonight, say something else. Feel free to bring up any other topic that you wanted to hear about tonight. Don't be afraid to bring it up. Otherwise, if we don't have more on this, I'm really excited. So next time is Cinco de Mayo. We're reading Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and that is a Zoom only. And then we have an in-person only, no offense to our Zoom friends, but we really want to kick off what it's like to get back together in person. And we're going to do Writers and Lovers by Lily King on May 20th at Local Roots in Richfield. I've put the information in the chat. I can share it again. But moving forward, June through October, Wednesday night Zoom, Thursday night in person. Same book, same week, back to back. Feel free to come to both if you want. Feel free to only attend the one that works for you. I don't expect anyone to actually come to both, but I'd love to see you. So we have our schedule set through October, and thanks to the friends, we will continue with Zooms, like I said, on Wednesdays and the in-person on Thursdays. So get your vaccinations, stay safe, and please join us. This place has local, sustainable menu. They have a beer and wine selection that's rotating. You'll be able to order at the counter and then bring it outside. There's a fire pit. There's some tents. There's 2 parking lots. It's on 66th Street at about Elliott Avenue. So like just east of Chicago Avenue, not too far from Portland, if that helps anyone. Not too far from the airport. It's on the south
Todd,
side.
there's regular flights.
There's regular flights. You can fly in, Todd. There's cheap deals right now to come to Minneapolis, St. Paul.
But you know, Minneapolis has one of the best airports.
They do. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like, is this a shopping mall or is this an airport?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you might want to go and just go to eat at the airport. There's great restaurants. There's great shops. Absolutely. But if you come in, don't just go to the airport. Come to Local Roots on 66th Street and join us. So yeah, 5/5 Mexican Gothic, 5/20 Writers and Lovers by Lily King at Local Roots, and then June, July, August, September, October, same book, same week. And I can share that schedule again, but we'll have it all on booksandbars.com and on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Anyone else have any other questions, comments, anything they want to share or ask, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I'm really excited. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and it's Cinco de Mayo. So please have a beverage if you imbibe, and let's, and maybe have some mushrooms before it. If you've read the book, you'll know why. And hopefully you'll enjoy that one, and we'll have a good discussion about it. But thank you guys for coming. Great to see you, and really hope that soon everyone will be a lot safer to actually be able to see you in person, and I look forward to that. So thanks again. Good night, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Cool. Tripping with Jeff. Can't wait.
Tripping with Jeff. That's right. Bring your shrooms next time. Bring your stories of shrooms at least. Good night, everybody.
Night.